Margaret Hayes crawled across frozen planks at a train station in Wyoming, her dress torn, her Bible face down in the snow. 50 feet ahead, the man, as she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry, climbed into a wagon with another woman pressed against his shoulder. He never looked back. Not once. That was the day she died, and the day she started living. Jamie Thornton stood in his daughter's doorway at 4 in the morning, watching Kate sleep. 12 years old, and she'd already learned to fold her dead mother's apron with hospital corners. The same apron Kate wore every morning to cook breakfast for her brothers because Jamie couldn't figure out how to make oatmeal without burning the pot. 5 years, 1,825 days since Lizzie died. And every single one of them, Kate had been doing the work that should have been his. The girl shifted in her sleep, and Jamie saw the dark circles under her eyes. 12 years old, going on 40. While other girls her age were learning to dance and giggle over boys, Kate was teaching herself how to mend shirts and budget household expenses and be a mother to children who'd forgotten they had one. Jamie closed the door softly and walked downstairs. The kitchen was dark and cold. He'd let the fire die again. Another thing Kate would have to fix when she woke up in an hour. He poured himself coffee from the pot he'd made the night before. It was cold and bitter, thick as mud. He drank it anyway. 5 years of cold coffee and burned meals and silence so heavy it pressed on his chest like a hand. The ranch was dying. Not the land or the cattle, those were fine. But the heart of it, the home, was shutting down, one room at a time. 2 housekeepers in 6 months both quit because they couldn't stand the weight of all that grief. The last one, Mrs. Chen, had lasted 3 weeks before she packed her bags and told Jamie she'd rather work for a man who wasn't already dead inside. He'd stood there and watched her go, hadn't argued, because she was right. The front door opened, and Hank Muller came in, stomping snow off his boots. Hank had been foreman at Iron Ridge for 10 years. More than that, he'd been Jamie's closest friend since the day Jamie had pulled him out of a stampede that should have killed him. Hank owed Jamie his life, which meant Hank was the only man on the ranch who wasn't afraid to tell Jamie when he was being a fool. "Boss," Hank said, hanging his hat on the peg by the door, "you look like hell." "Morning to you too." Hank crossed to the stove and poured himself a cup of the terrible coffee. He took one sip, made a face, and set it down. "You can't keep going like this. Those kids need more than what you're giving them." Jamie's jaw tightened. "They need a roof over their heads and food on the table. I'm providing that. They need a parent. Kate's doing all the work, and you're hiding in this kitchen at 4 in the morning, drinking coffee that tastes like boot leather." "I'm not hiding." "Then what do you call it? Because from where I'm standing, you've been hiding for 5 years. Ever since Lizzie died, you've been walking around this place like a ghost. And those kids are paying the price." Jamie set his cup down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "Don't talk to me about Lizzie. Someone needs to. You act like saying her name will bring back the pain." News flash, Jamie. The pain never left. You just stopped feeling anything else. The words landed like punches. Jamie wanted to argue, to push back, but he couldn't. Because Hank was right. He had stopped feeling. It was easier that way. Safer. "The train comes at 9, Hank said quietly. "That mail-order bride Kate arranged. She'll be on it." Jamie's stomach turned. "I'm not going." "Yes, you are. Because Kate wrote those letters using your name. She spent 6 months corresponding with a woman in Boston pretending to be you because she was desperate enough to try anything to fix this family. And you're going to honor that. You're going to go to that station and meet that woman and at least give her the courtesy of an explanation." "I never asked Kate to do that." "She shouldn't have had to ask. She's 12 years old, Jamie. She should be worrying about hair ribbons and school dances, not whether her father is going to survive another winter of grief." Hank picked up his hat and headed for the door. Before he left, he turned back. "Lizzie would hate what you've become. You know that, right? She'd hate seeing you like this, shutting everyone out, teaching your kids that love ends in so much pain it's not worth having." The door closed. Jamie sat alone in the dark kitchen as the first light of dawn started to break through the windows. Hank was right about all of it. Kate had arranged the mail-order bride in secret writing letters late at night when she thought Jamie was asleep. He'd found her one night 3 months ago, hunched over the desk in Lizzie's old sewing room, carefully forging his signature at the bottom of a letter. He should have stopped her, should have told her no, that they'd manage on their own, that bringing a stranger into their house wouldn't fix anything. but he'd seen the desperation in her eyes, the exhaustion, the way her hands shook as she sealed the envelope. And he'd walked away without saying a word. Because the truth was, Jamie didn't know how to fix this family. He'd been stumbling through the darkness for 5 years, and every step felt like walking deeper into a cave with no exit. Maybe Kate was right. Maybe a stranger could do what he couldn't. Or maybe she'd take one look at this broken household and run. Most people did. Jamie stood and walked to the window. The sun was rising over the mountains, turning the snow gold. Somewhere out there, a train was heading towards Silver Creek, carrying a woman who thought she was coming to marry a man who wanted her. A woman who'd written letters full of hope to someone who barely existed anymore. He owed her the truth. He owed Kate the effort. He owed his children something more than what he'd been giving them. Jamie finished his terrible coffee and went to get his coat. The ride into Silver Creek took 40 minutes through heavy snow. Jamie went alone, telling Hank to stay with the cattle. The truth was, he didn't want a witness to this meeting. Didn't want anyone to see him turn away another person who'd made the mistake of getting close to the Thornton family. The train station was nearly empty when he arrived. A few townspeople milled about waiting for deliveries or picking up mail. Jamie tied his horse to the post and walked toward the platform, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. He was late. The 4:15 from Cheyenne had arrived 30 minutes ago. He'd gotten held up with a fence that had blown down in the wind, and by the time he'd fixed it and cleaned up, he was already behind schedule. As he approached the platform, he saw her. A woman was on her ass in the snow, not kneeling, crawling. Her dress was torn at the hem, and her hands were red with cold. A leather valise lay a few feet away, held together with twine. Near her face down in the snow was a Bible. 50 feet beyond her, a man was climbing into a wagon. A woman in an emerald green dress sat beside him, blonde and beautiful, pressed against his shoulder like she belonged there. The man never looked back, just snapped the reins and drove away. Jamie stopped walking. He'd seen cruelty before, seen animals abandoned, people betrayed, promises broken. But there was something about the casual way that man drove off, leaving a woman on her knees in freezing weather, that made Jamie's blood run cold. The woman was trying to stand. Her legs kept giving out. She'd get halfway up and then collapse again, her hands slipping on the icy planks. No one was helping her. The station master had disappeared into his office. Two women with market baskets stood nearby, whispering behind their hands, watching like it was a show. Jamie's father had taught him that you help people weaker than you. Always, no exceptions, and Lizzie had reinforced it every day of their marriage. You help the ones who can't help themselves, Jamie. That's what makes us human. He started walking toward her. As he got closer, he could see her face. She was older than he'd expected. Not a girl. A woman maybe 30 or so, with dark hair escaping from a bun and eyes that held a kind of exhausted fury. She was fighting to stand, fighting the ice and the cold, and her own body refusing to quit, even though everything was working against her. She looked up and saw him watching. Her chin lifted. Even on her knees in the snow, there was pride in that gesture. "Ma'am," Jamie said. She didn't respond, just kept trying to stand. Jamie looked at the wagon disappearing down the road, looked at the valise with the twine, looked at the Bible in the snow, and he knew. This was her. Margaret Hayes from Boston. The woman Kate had been writing to for 6 months. The woman who thought she was coming to marry a man named Preston Blackwell. The woman Preston Blackwell had just abandoned at a train station in the middle of a Wyoming winter. Jamie walked closer. "Miss Hayes." She froze, looked up at him with eyes full of suspicion and pain. "How do you know my name?" "I'm Jamie Thornton. I was supposed to meet you here." Confusion flickered across her face. "You were supposed to meet Preston Blackwell's bride." "No, ma'am, I was supposed to meet mine." Understanding hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, and Jamie could see her mind working, trying to make sense of it. 2 men, 2 letters, 2 promises, and she'd gotten on the train for the wrong one. "I don't understand," she said. Her voice was steady despite the cold, despite everything. Strong. Jamie picked up her valise and the Bible, brushed the snow off both. "Train station's not the place for this conversation. You're half frozen and that dress isn't going to keep you alive past dark. Will you come with me? I'll explain everything. And if you want to leave after that, I'll pay for your ticket back east. No obligations." She looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, looking for the trap, the thing men always wanted when they offered help. Jamie met her eyes and waited. He wasn't going to push. She'd been pushed enough for one day. Finally, she nodded. All right. He offered his hand. She took it. Her fingers were like ice, and when she stood, he could feel her trembling. Not from fear, from cold and exhaustion and the weight of traveling 2,000 miles to be rejected on a train platform by a man who didn't have the decency to do it in private. Jamie helped her to the wagon and gave her the blanket from his pack. She wrapped it around herself without thanking him. Didn't need to. They both knew this wasn't kindness. This was just what you did when someone was freezing. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. The station master watched from his window, but didn't come out. The two women with baskets whispered louder. Jamie ignored them all and guided the wagon toward the road. They rode in silence for the first mile. The snow was falling heavier now, covering the tracks behind them. Jamie let her have the quiet. She needed time to process, to sort through everything that had just happened. Finally, he spoke. My daughter Kate wrote those letters to you. She's 12. Used my name and forged my signature. I didn't know about it until 3 months ago, and by then you had already agreed to come. Margaret kept her eyes on the road ahead. Why didn't you stop it? Because Kate was desperate. Because my other housekeeper had just quit, and Kate was doing the work of 3 adults, and I didn't know how to tell her no. So you let a child arrange a marriage for you. I let a child try to save a family that's been drowning for 5 years. She turned to look at him then. Really look. Your wife died 5 years ago. Winter fever. Left me with 3 kids and no idea how to be what they needed. I'm sorry. Don't be. Sorry doesn't fix anything. More silence. The wind picked up, howling through the bare trees. Jamie pulled his coat tighter and wished he'd brought a second blanket. So what happens now? Margaret asked. You take me to your ranch. I meet your children, and then what, I cook and clean until I can't stand it anymore and leave like the others. That's one option. What's the other? You leave now, I give you money for a ticket, put you on tomorrow's train, and you go back to Boston. Forget this place exists. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can't go back to Boston. Why not? Because there's nothing there. My parents are dead. My sister Grace married and moved to Philadelphia 2 years ago. I was working in a textile mill, making $8 a week in a room I shared with 4 other women. I came west because staying east meant dying slowly in a place that never wanted me. Jamie understood that, understood the weight of staying somewhere that felt like a tomb. So you came to marry a man you'd never met. I came to marry a man who wrote me letters that made me believe I could be something other than invisible. Preston Blackwell wrote those letters. Preston Blackwell lied in those letters. He told me he valued character. He told me we could build something worth having. Then he met a woman with a rich father and decided I wasn't worth the ink he'd used. There was no self-pity in her voice, just cold anger, the kind that came from being underestimated too many times. Jamie respected that. I can offer you a job, $25 a month, room and board. You'd cook for the ranch hands, 7 men including me. Help manage the house. Help with the children if you're willing. It's not marriage. It's not permanent, but it's something. Why would you offer me anything you don't know me? Because Kate went to the trouble of finding you. And because I watched you crawl across that platform refusing to quit even when your body was giving out. That tells me something about your character. She pulled the blanket tighter. I need you to know something before we go any further. All right. I lied in my letters too. I told Preston I could cook. I can't. I've never cooked a proper meal in my life. I told him I could ride a horse. I'm terrified of them. I told him I was 27. I'm 31. Jamie almost smiled. Isn't that enough? I don't care about the lies. You did what you had to do, but I need one thing from you if you take this job. What? Don't lie to me. Not about anything. Not ever. I buried a wife. I'm raising 3 children alone. I don't have room in my life for things that aren't true. She met his eyes, held them. No more lies. Good. They rode for another mile. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. White house with dark shutters, barn solid, and square smoke rising from the chimney. 3 miles of land covered in snow cattle dotting the landscape like dark stones. It's beautiful, Margaret said quietly. It's work, Jamie corrected. Hard work, every day. The land doesn't care if you're tired or sin or grieving. It just takes, and if you're not strong enough, it'll break you. Everything breaks eventually. Maybe, but some things break clean and some things shatter. I'm trying to keep my family from shattering. The wagon rolled down the hill toward the house. As they got closer, Jamie could see Kate standing in the doorway. She'd been watching for them, waiting. This was going to be harder than he'd thought. Kate stood on the porch with her arms crossed, her face set in that expression Jamie had come to know too well, the one that said she was scared but would die before admitting it. She watched the wagon approach with eyes that were too old for 12. When Jamie pulled the horses to a stop, Kate didn't move, just stood there blocking the door like a guard. "Who's that?" Kate asked. Not hello, not welcome, just suspicion. "This is Miss Hayes. She's going to be our housekeeper." "We don't need a housekeeper." Jamie climbed down from the wagon. "Kate, we talked about this. I changed my mind. I don't want her here." Margaret didn't wait for Jamie to help her down. She climbed down herself, wrapped in the blanket, and walked to the bottom of the porch steps. She looked up at Kate without flinching from the hostility in the girl's eyes. "Your father offered me a job," Margaret said. Her voice was calm, steady. "I took it. That's between him and me. It has nothing to do with replacing anyone. Don't talk about my mother." "I won't, unless you want me to." "I won't ever want you to." "Then I won't ever bring it up." They stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like a canyon. Kate's chin was trembling, but she held her ground. Margaret stood in the snow, exhausted from travel, humiliated from rejection, but not backing down. Jamie watched them and felt something shift in his chest. Margaret could have been gentle, could have tried to win Kate over with soft words and fake sweetness. Instead, she'd set a boundary, respected the girl's anger without apologizing for her presence. Lizzie would have done the same thing. "Kate," Jamie said gently, "Miss Hayes has traveled 2,000 miles. She's cold and tired and needs a place to stay. Whatever you're feeling about this, we're going to handle it like civilized people." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want her here. I changed my mind. I don't want any of this." And there it was, the truth Kate had been holding in her small body for months. She'd written those letters in desperation, but now that a real woman stood on their porch, the fantasy had crashed into reality. Someone else in her mother's kitchen. Someone else cooking her mother's recipes. Someone else sleeping under her mother's roof. It was too much. Jamie climbed the steps and put his hand on Kate's shoulder. "I know this is hard. I know it feels like a betrayal, but you can't keep doing what you've been doing. You're 12 years old, Kate. You deserve to be 12. I can handle it. I've been handling it for 5 years, and it's killing you." Kate shook her head violently. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't need help. We don't need her." "Yes, we do." The words hung in the cold air. Kate looked at her father like he'd slapped her. Then she turned and ran into the house. Jamie heard her boots on the stairs, heard a door slam somewhere above. He stood on the porch feeling like he'd just lost a battle he didn't know how to win. Margaret's voice came from behind him. "She'll come around." "You don't know that." "No, but I know what it's like to protect something you love by pushing everyone away. And I know it doesn't work." Jamie turned to look at her. She was still standing in the snow, still wrapped in that blanket, looking up at him with eyes that had seen their own share of loss. "Come inside," he said, "before you freeze." Hank Muller appeared from around the corner of the barn, moving fast despite his bulk. When he saw Margaret, his face split into a grin. "Well now," he said, "boss finally hired someone who ain't 60 years old and mean as a rattlesnake." He stuck out his hand. "Hank Mueller, ma'am, foreman, occasional cook, and full-time disaster." Margaret shook his hand. "Margaret Hayes." "Miss Hayes, I want you to know that whatever you make for breakfast tomorrow, even if it's raw flour and creek water, it'll be better than what I've been feeding these boys. I made stew last week that the dog wouldn't touch, and that dog eats horse manure." "That's enough, Hank," Jamie said, but there was almost a smile in his voice. "Just setting expectations low so she can exceed them. Smart management." Margaret's lips twitched, almost smiled, but she was too exhausted to commit to it fully. A boy appeared in the hallway. 9 years old, thin with dark hair like Jamie's, and a book clutched against his chest like armor. He stopped when he saw Margaret, his eyes going wide and careful. "Ben," Jamie said, "come meet Miss Hayes." Ben approached slowly, each step measured. "Hello, ma'am." Margaret noticed the stutter immediately, heard how he caught on the first word, how he had to push through it. "Hello, Ben," she said. "What's the book?" He looked down like he'd forgotten he was holding it. "Treasure Island." First time reading it, the stutter disappeared. Third, "What's your favorite part?" His whole face changed. The caution melted away, replaced by excitement. "The apple barrel." When Jim hears Long John Silver's plan and everything changes. One minute he thinks he knows who everyone is, and the next minute he realizes he's been wrong about all of it. Margaret felt those words land somewhere deep. "I know something about that." Ben studied her with those serious eyes. "Are you staying?" "I don't know yet." "Kate doesn't want you here." "I know. She doesn't want anybody here. She thinks if somebody new comes, it means Mama's really gone." The honesty of children. It cut cleaner than any adult's cruelty. "Your mother is really gone, Ben," Margaret said quietly. "A new person in the kitchen doesn't change that one way or the other." Ben nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he already knew but needed to hear someone say. Then a small tornado came barreling down the hallway. 5 years old, brown curls flying, wearing a nightgown at 3 in the afternoon. One sock on one sock, missing. "Are you the new lady?" she demanded. "I am." "Can you make pancakes? Papa burns everything, and Kate won't let me help because I spilled the flour that one time, but it was an accident, and also there was a cat involved." "You don't have a cat," Jamie said from behind them. "I might get one." Margaret looked down at this child who was all motion and no breaks and felt something crack behind her ribs. "I'll try pancakes tomorrow." "Trying's good," Abby announced. Then she grabbed Margaret's hand and pulled. "Come see your room. It's where Mama used to sew. The window faces the mountains, but you can't see them today because of the snow. But when you can see them, they're really pretty. And sometimes there are eagles, and once I saw a bear, but Kate said it was probably a dog. But I know what I saw, and it was definitely a bear." Jamie watched his youngest daughter drag this stranger into his house, chattering the whole way, and his face did something complicated. Not quite a smile, not quite a flinch. "Don't," he said quietly. Margaret stopped on the stairs. "Don't promise her things. Abby gets attached fast. Last housekeeper was here 3 weeks. When she left, Abby didn't talk for 2 days." His eyes were flat now, closed off. The warmth from the train station gone, like it had never existed. "This is a job, Miss Hayes. You do the work, you get paid, and if you leave clean. No attachments that hurt my children when you go." There it was, the wall Margaret had been waiting for. Every man had one. Jamie Thornton's was just more honest than most. "I understand," she said. "Make sure you do." He turned and walked toward the barn, his shoulders rigid, his whole body radiating that same closed-off energy. Margaret understood now what she hadn't at the train station. Jamie Thornton hadn't hired her out of kindness. He'd hired her out of desperation, and he was already preparing for her to leave. Abby tugged on her hand. "Come on, I'll show you the mean stove, but you can beat it if you're patient." Margaret let the child lead her up the stairs. The kitchen was a disaster. Dishes stacked in the wash basin, flour coating every surface, a cast iron stove that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. And on a shelf near the window, a tin box labeled in careful handwriting, "Lizzie's Recipes." Margaret's hand shook as she reached for it. The last time she'd touched a dead woman's things was clearing out her mother's drawer when she was 16. 3 hairpins, a comb with missing teeth, a prayer card from St. Anne's. Everything a life fit into one small drawer. She opened the box. Recipe cards, maybe 30 of them, written in a hand that looped and curved like the woman had all the time in the world. Biscuits and gravy, sourdough bread, chicken and dumplings. Instructions that assumed you already knew things Margaret didn't. At the bottom of the stack, one card that wasn't a recipe. Margaret pulled it out. Different handwriting, shakier, written in pencil instead of ink, like it was scribbled fast. "If I don't make it through this winter, Jamie will try to shut everyone out. It's what he does. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. Don't let him. The children need more than a closed door." Margaret read it twice. Then she put it back at the bottom of the stack under the recipe for sourdough bread and closed the lid. A dead woman's warning. A roadmap. A plea from someone who'd known she was dying, asking a stranger she'd never meet to save the man she loved. Margaret stood in that kitchen, in that house full of grief, and made a decision. She wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Not until she tried everything she had to give these people what they'd lost. Or until this place broke her like it had broken everyone else who'd tried. 4 in the morning came fast. Margaret lit the kitchen lamp and faced the stove. 3 attempts to start a fire. The first died like a whispered apology. The second filled this kitchen with smoke until she found the damper and wrenched it open. The third caught, held, small victories. She pulled out Lizzie's recipe card for pancakes. 2 cups flour, 2 eggs, milk until smooth. Cook on greased griddle until bubbles form, then flip. What kind of bubbles? How many? How big? The batter came out lumpy. She poured it onto the griddle and watched it spread into something that resembled no food she'd ever seen. Waited, poked it, waited more. The bottom burned while the top stayed raw. The second pancake tore in half when she tried to flip it. The third caught fire. Margaret was scraping charred batter off the griddle, losing a fight against tears when she heard him behind her. Too much heat. Jamie's voice in the dark kitchen. Margaret didn't turn around. I know that now. And the batter needs more milk. If you say heavy cream, I swear I will throw this spatula at your head. I have never in my life poured heavy cream. Silence. Then quiet amusement in his voice. How about like water that's thinking about being thicker? Despite everything, she almost laughed. I need to tell you something, she said, still not turning around. Go ahead. I lied to Preston Blackwell in my letters. I told him I could cook. I can't. I've never cooked a meal in my life. Not once. What else? I said I could ride a horse. I'm terrified of them. What else? I told him I was 27. I'm 31. Isn't that enough? Jamie walked to the stove. He took the bowl from her hands, added milk, stirred it smooth in 3 turns, and poured a perfect circle on the griddle. Watch the surface, he said. When the bubbles pop and leave holes that don't fill back in, flip. Wrist, not arm. He demonstrated. The pancake landed perfect, golden brown on both sides. Lizzie burned everything for 3 months after we married, he said, eyes on the griddle. Salt instead of sugar, once. A pie crust so hard I cracked a tooth on it. Kate lived on applesauce until Lizzie figured out the stove. Really, I ate her first biscuits out of love and nearly died of loyalty. He handed Margaret the spatula. You'll learn, but I'm not going to lie to you about something else. What? I don't care that you lied to Preston. A woman does what she has to. But don't lie to me. Not about anything. Not ever. I buried a wife. I'm raising 3 children alone. I don't have room in my life for things that aren't true. His eyes were hard, not cruel, just certain. No more lies, Margaret said. Good. Now make a pancake before Abby wakes up and holds us both accountable. Margaret poured, watched the bubbles, counted 3 heartbeats after the holes stayed open, flipped, wrist not arm. The pancake landed crooked brown on one side, pale on the other. But it was whole. Better, Jamie said. Better, Margaret agreed. They worked side by side in the warm kitchen. Him pouring coffee, her making pancakes that improved slightly with each attempt. Outside, the snow kept falling, sealing them in, burying the road back to town under drifts that wouldn't melt for months. Abby arrived first, climbed into her chair, both socks missing now, and stared at her plate. They're not round, she observed. No, Margaret said. They're shaped like clouds. I suppose they are. Abby took a bite with her fingers, chewed, grinned with 2 missing teeth. I like clouds. Ben came down, ate 3 pancakes in silence. Looked up. Better than Papa's. Hank Muller appeared in the doorway, snow on his hat, grin, splitting his face. That bar is underground, but I'll take it, Miss Hayes. You just made history. First meal in this house in 2 months that didn't make anyone consider running away. The ranch hands filed in. Billy Price, 18, all freckles and eagerness. Jack O'Brien, quiet and watchful. 2 others whose names Margaret caught and filed away. They ate everything she put in front of them and said thank you like it was church. Kate didn't come down. Margaret fixed a plate, 3 pancakes, the best 3 she'd made. She carried it upstairs and set it outside the closed door. Didn't knock, didn't call out, just left it and walked away. An hour later, when she came back to collect the plate, it was empty, scraped clean, fork placed neatly on top. Not forgiveness, not acceptance. But the girl had eaten, and that was ground to stand on. Margaret washed dishes until her hands were red. Through the window, she watched Jamie cross the yard toward the barn, Hank beside him talking with his hands the way he talked about everything. Three cowboys followed, heads bent against the wind. On the stairs behind her, a floorboard creaked. Margaret didn't turn around, but in the reflection of the kitchen window, dark against the bright snow outside, she could see Kate standing on the middle step, watching her, not speaking, just watching with those fierce blue eyes that looked so much like the mother she was trying to protect. Then Kate turned and went back upstairs, quiet as she'd come. Margaret dried her hands, tied on her apron, reached for Lizzie's recipe box. Beef stew tonight. 7 men and 3 children, one of whom wanted to destroy her, one who was watching to see which way the wind blew, one who already trusted her enough to hold her hand, and a man who'd told her plain as day, don't get attached. This is temporary, everyone leaves. Margaret opened the recipe box and saw Lizzie's note again. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. Don't let him. The snow was still falling. The road back to town had disappeared under 3 feet of white. The temperature was dropping towards something that would kill a person who wasn't careful. Margaret Hayes had nowhere to go, nothing to fall back on, and a kitchen full of things she didn't know how to use. She picked up the beef stew card and started reading. 3 weeks passed like a dream half remembered. Margaret learned the stove's moods the way a sailor learns the sea, by getting burned, a blister on her right palm from the firebox door, a scald on her wrist from steam, a singed eyebrow from leaning too close when she opened the oven. Each injury was a lesson, and Margaret collected them the way other women collected recipes. Her cooking improved, slowly. The pancakes came out round more often than not. The biscuits achieved a golden color that made Hank Muller close his eyes and moan like he was in church. The beef stew started at noon, as Jamie had suggested, emerged tender enough that the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. But it was the small victories that mattered most. Ben sitting on the back porch reading in the cold because he felt safe enough to ask Margaret to talk to Kate about the piano. Abby following her everywhere, chattering about imaginary cats and real bears and the difference between clouds and pancakes. And Kate, who still didn't speak to her directly, but who left folded laundry on the kitchen table every morning at 5, done to a standard Margaret couldn't match. Jamie watched it all from a distance, present but not participating. He ate what she cooked without comment. He nodded when she reported on the children. He thanked her for her work with the same flat courtesy he'd give a stranger. And every night he disappeared into the barn for hours doing work that probably didn't need doing just to avoid being in the house. Margaret understood. He was maintaining the wall, keeping the distance, making sure that when she left because, in his mind, she would definitely leave, it wouldn't hurt as much. The problem was she wasn't planning to leave. On a Saturday afternoon in the 4th week, a wagon rolled up to Iron Ridge Ranch. Margaret was in the kitchen, elbow deep in bread dough, when she heard the wheels. She looked out the window and felt her stomach turn to ice. Preston Blackwell climbed down from a wagon that looked worse than the last time she'd seen it. One wheel wobbled. The horse was thin, and Preston himself looked like a man who'd been chewed up and spit out by something meaner than he was. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron and walked outside. The January wind hit her like a fist, but she barely felt it. All her attention was on the man who'd left her on her knees in the snow. "Miss Hayes," Preston said, removing his hat. His hair was unwashed. His clothes hung loose. He'd lost weight. "Mr. Blackwell, I need to speak with you." "You're speaking." He flinched at the flatness in her voice. "Cordelia left me, took $2,000 and ran off with a cattle dealer from Cheyenne. Left me with debts and a ranch I can't run alone." Margaret felt nothing, not satisfaction, not vindication, just a distant observation of a man getting exactly what he deserved. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, because her mother had raised her to be polite, even to fools. "I made a mistake," Preston continued, "choosing her over you. I see that now. You were honest, straightforward. I was a fool to pick a pretty face over real character." Margaret studied him. 6 weeks ago, this man had been everything she wanted, the answer to every prayer she'd whispered in that Boston tenement. a home, a husband, a future that didn't end in blindness and poverty. She felt nothing now, not anger, not even pity, just a cool recognition that some people only learn to value things after they've lost them. I'm asking for another chance, Preston said. Come with me. Montana, maybe. Somewhere fresh. We can build what we talked about in those letters. No, Preston. Not maybe. Not let me think about it. No. His face reddened. You'd rather stay here as a housekeeper, a servant in another man's house. I'd rather be my own woman than any man's second choice. I'm choosing you now. Because she left, because you ran out of options. That's not choosing Preston. That's drowning and grabbing the nearest thing that floats. Preston stepped closer. His hand closed around her arm. Not hard, but firm. Margaret, be reasonable. What kind of future do you have here? Take your hand off me. Not until you listen. She told you to let go. The voice came from the porch. Kate stood in the doorway. 12 years old, arms crossed, chin raised, eyes blazing with the fury that had nothing to do with Margaret and everything to do with a girl who'd watched too many people try to take things from the women in her life. This is a private conversation, young lady, Preston said. This is my porch, and she said let go. Preston released Margaret's arm. Who is this? He demanded. My name's Kate Thornton, and you're the man who left Miss Hayes at the train station. I know all about you. The whole town knows. You picked the pretty one, and the pretty one robbed you blind, and now you're here begging for scraps. The words poured out of Kate like water through a broken dam, fierce and unstoppable. He doesn't get to come here and grab you. Kate continued, her voice shaking but strong. He doesn't get to tell you to be reasonable. He threw you away like you were nothing. And now he wants you back because he's got nothing. And that's not love. That's just being pathetic. Margaret realized with a shock that vibrated through her entire body that Kate wasn't just defending her. She was defending her mother. Defending every woman who had ever been treated like something a man could pick up and put down depending on what suited him. Preston's face had gone dark red. I don't have to stand here and be lectured by a child. Then leave, Kate said. The road's that way. Try not to get lost, though I wouldn't mind if you did. Kate, that's enough. Margaret's voice was firm but not harsh. Mr. Blackwell, you have your answer. It won't change. Please leave. Preston looked between them. The woman who wouldn't have him and the girl who'd shred him to pieces if he stayed another minute. His mouth opened, closed. He shook his head. You'll regret this. Maybe, Margaret said, but it'll be my regret, not yours. He climbed back onto his broken wagon and drove away. The wobbling wheels squeaked with each rotation. Neither Margaret nor Kate looked away until he was gone. Then Kate sat down on the porch step and put her face in her hands. Margaret sat beside her, not touching, not pushing, just present. I don't know why I did that, Kate whispered. Because you were brave. Because you know what it looks like when someone tries to take away a woman's choice. I was so mean to you. You were protecting your family. That's not mean, that's love. Kate lifted her face. Tears streaked her cheeks. The first tears Margaret had ever seen from this girl who'd built herself into a fortress. I miss my mama, Kate said. I miss her every single day, and nobody talks about her. Papa won't say her name. Ben was too little to really remember. Abby never knew her, and I'm the only one who remembers what her voice sounded like. And sometimes I'm scared I'll forget that too, and then she'll really be gone. Margaret put her arm around Kate. The girl stiffened for a moment, every instinct screaming to pull away to rebuild the wall to be strong. Then she broke. She turned into Margaret and cried, deep, wrenching howls that shook her whole body. The accumulated grief of 5 years poured out onto the shoulder of a woman she tried to hate and couldn't. Margaret held her and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Grief didn't need words. It needed witness. It needed someone to hold you while the storm passed and not let go until you were ready. They sat on that porch step for a long time while the snow fell around them and the cold bit at their fingers, and neither of them moved. Finally, Kate pulled back, wiped her face with her sleeve, took a shaky breath. I still don't need a mother, she said. I know. But maybe I could use a friend. Margaret's chest ached with the beauty and the cost of those words. This girl who'd spent 5 years building walls offering to open a door. I'd like that, Margaret said. Kate nodded, stood up, brushed snow off her skirt. I'm going to check on Ben. Kate, the girl turned. Your mother's voice. Tell me about it sometime. I'd like to hear. Something broke open in Kate's face. Something that looked like sunlight through a crack in a door that had been closed too long. Maybe, Kate said. Maybe I will. She went inside. Margaret stayed on the porch, her arms still warm where Kate had leaned against her. Preston's wagon tracks were already disappearing under fresh snow. From the window above, Margaret heard Jamie's voice. Quiet, reading aloud. David Copperfield from the chapter where Ben had left off. He was sitting with his son, holding the book, being present. Margaret closed her eyes and let the snow fall on her face and thought this might work. This broken family and this broken woman, and this man who was learning slowly and painfully to unlock the doors he'd sealed shut. It might actually work. The change in Kate shifted something in the house. She started eating breakfast at the table, not beside Margaret, not across from her, but at the table in the same room breathing the same air without treating it like a concession. The first morning Kate sat down, Abby froze with a fork full of pancake halfway to her mouth. Ben looked up from his book. Hank stopped chewing. The whole kitchen held its breath. Pass the butter, Kate said to Margaret, looking right at her. Margaret passed the butter. Thank you. You're welcome. And that was it. No fanfare, no acknowledgement, just butter passed between two people who'd decided not to be enemies anymore. But Hank caught Margaret's eye across the table and winked. And Abby went back to eating with a grin that said she understood exactly what had just happened. Jamie watched from his end of the table. He'd been different since Preston's visit. Quieter, if that was possible for a man who already used words like, they cost money, but a different kind of quiet. The granite was still there, but something underneath it had cracked, and through the cracks came things he hadn't shown before. He helped Ben with reading in the evenings now. Sitting beside him on the parlor floor, their heads bent together over whatever book Ben had chosen. He let Abby climb into his lap without stiffening, and he said Lizzie's name. That was the biggest change. Small moments, almost accidental. Lizzie used to put nutmeg in the apple butter. Your mother had a way with horses, Kate. You get that from her. Lizzie would have liked this snow. She always said Wyoming winter was God's way of making you appreciate spring. Each time he said her name, something eased in the room, like a window being opened in a house that had been sealed too long. Margaret felt the change between them too, something growing in the spaces between words. In the moments when their hands brushed reaching for the same dish, in the way his eyes found hers across a room and held on a beat too long. She tried not to think about it, tried to remember his words from her first day. This is a job, no attachments. But Lizzie's note lived in her memory like a splinter she couldn't pull out. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. On a Tuesday morning in the 5th week, everything changed. Margaret was rolling out pie crust when she heard the thud from upstairs. Not a dropped book, not a slammed door, the sound of a body hitting the floor, heavy and wrong. She was up the stairs before she'd set down the rolling pin. Ben's door was open. He was on the floor beside his bed, face down, his copy of David Copperfield splayed beneath him. Ben! Margaret dropped to her knees. She turned him over. His skin was on fire, burning, the kind of heat that radiated through her hands like she was touching the stove. Ben, look at me. His eyes opened, glassy, unfocused. Mama? Margaret's stomach turned to ice. It's Margaret, honey. Can you tell me what hurts everything? His voice was thin as paper. My chest, can't breathe right. She pressed her ear to his chest. The rattling sound she heard there stopped her heart. She'd heard that sound before. In a Boston tenement when she was 16, sitting beside her mother's bed, listening to lungs filled with fluid that no amount of prayer could drain. Pneumonia. Kate, Margaret shouted, get your father, now! Footsteps on the landing. Kate appeared annoyed, ready to fight. Then she saw Ben on the floor and the color drained from her face. Get your father, he's in the barn. Run. Kate ran. Margaret heard the front door slam, heard boots on the porch, and then she was alone with a 9-year-old boy whose breathing sounded like something tearing. She lifted Ben onto the bed. He weighed almost nothing. She piled blankets on him, then pulled them off because his fever was too high. Then she put one blanket back because he was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Stay with me, she said. Talk about what? Anything. Tell me about David Copperfield. Where are you in the story? He just met Agnes. Ben's breathing was shallow. Each inhale a fight. She's the one who really loves him, but he doesn't know it yet. Men are stupid that way. Ben almost smiled. Then the coughing started, and Margaret held him while his thin body convulsed. Jamie came through the door like something wild. Snow on his shoulders, hat gone, face stripped of every wall he'd built. How bad? He was beside the bed in 2 strides, his hand on Ben's forehead. The hand that could rope cattle and break horses is trembled. Margaret kept her voice level. His chest is congested, fever's high, breathing's bad. We need Doc Sullivan. Doc Sullivan's in Rollins, train's not running. When does he get back? 3 days, maybe 4. Ben coughed again. Something came up, rust-colored, bloody. Jamie saw it. His face went white. He stood up, stepped back from the bed, and Margaret watched something happen that she'd been expecting since the day she found Lizzie's note. He shut down, right there in front of her. The fear hit something inside him and a door closed. The man who stood in that room suddenly wasn't a father anymore. He was a wall, granite and silence, and nothing behind the eyes. Jamie, Margaret said his name sharp. I'll send Hank for the doctor. Hank can't get to Rollins in this snow. I need you here. You seem to have it handled. The coldness of it stole her breath. His boy was struggling to breathe, and Jamie was retreating, disappearing into the same place he'd gone when Lizzie died. Your son is sick, Margaret said. He's scared. He needs his father. He needs a doctor. He needs you right now, this minute. Jamie looked at Ben. The boy's eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling with a sound like wet paper being torn. Jamie's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw locked. Then he turned and walked out. Margaret heard his boots on the stairs, heard the front door. He was gone. Into the snow, into the barn, into whatever dark corner he crawled to when the world got too close. He always does that. Kate's voice, small, from the doorway. Margaret turned. The girl stood there hugging herself. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked 12. When Mama got sick, he did the same thing. Went to the barn, didn't come back till it was too late. It's not too late, Kate. Your brother's going to be fine. You don't know that. No, I don't, but I'm going to act like I do, and I need your help. Something changed in Kate's face. The wall didn't come down, but a window opened. What do you need? Margaret had Kate boil water, find every clean cloth in the house, mustard powder from the pantry, honey, the whiskey from Jamie's study. Kate didn't argue, just moved with purpose. The purpose of a girl who'd been taking care of people since she was 7 and finally had someone telling her what to do. Abby appeared in the doorway clutching her rabbit. Is Ben going to die like Mama? The question hit Margaret like a fist. She knelt down. No, sweetheart. Ben is sick, but we're going to take care of him. Promise, Margaret hesitated. Some promises were made not because you knew you could keep them, but because the person asking needed to hear them. I promise I'm going to do everything I can. Abby studied her face. That's not the same. No, it isn't. But you'll try really hard. The hardest I've ever tried anything. Abby nodded, then she walked into Ben's room, climbed onto the bed, and tucked the rabbit under his arm. Mr. Buttons will help. He helped me when I had the cough. Margaret made a mustard plaster. Mustard powder mixed with flour and warm water spread on cloth laid across Ben's chest. Old medicine, the kind that worked when there was nothing better. She dosed him with honey and whiskey, a teaspoon every hour. She kept the room warm but not hot. She talked to him through the worst of it, reading David Copperfield aloud when he was conscious, just talking when he wasn't. Kate brought everything Margaret asked for. She changed cloths, boiled water, kept the stove fed. At midnight, Ben's fever spiked. His whole body shook with chills so violent the bed frame rattled. Margaret piled blankets on him and sang. She didn't know why, just a melody from somewhere deep, something her mother had hummed while scrubbing floors in their Boston tenement. Ben's hand found hers in the dark. Don't leave. I'm right here. Don't leave like everyone leaves. I'm right here, Ben. I'm not going anywhere. His fingers tightened around hers. Margaret held on and kept singing until the shaking passed and his breathing eased from terrible to merely bad. Kate sat in the corner. She hadn't gone to bed, just stayed because her brother was sick. "You know what you're doing," Kate said quietly. "No, I'm guessing based on what I saw nurses do when I was young." "You're guessing well." Margaret looked at her in the lamplight. Kate looked exactly like the photograph of Lizzie that hung in the parlor. Same cheekbones, same eyes that held too much for their age. "Your mother was brave," Margaret said. "She got sick nursing other people's children." "I know. You're brave too. You've been holding this family together since you were 7. Somebody had to." "Yes, and it shouldn't have been you. You were a child, Kate. You still are." Kate's chin trembled once. Then she locked it down. Margaret saw the resemblance that ran deeper than Lizzie's cheekbones. This girl had her father's walls, built the same way for the same reason. "He's going to be okay," Kate said, not a question, a command. "Yes," Margaret said, and this time she said it like a promise. The fever broke at dawn. Margaret woke with her head on the edge of Ben's bed, her hands still wrapped around his. The boy's skin was cool, not cold, not burning, cool, normal. His eyes opened, clear. "Miss Margaret?" "Right here." "I'm hungry." Margaret laughed. It came out half sob. "What do you want?" "Pancakes, the cloud ones." She stood and every joint protested. She was halfway to the door when Kate's voice stopped her. "Margaret." First time. No Miss Hayes, just her name said by a 12-year-old girl who'd sat up all night watching a stranger fight to save her brother. Margaret turned. "Thank you," Kate said. 2 words that cracked the wall from top to bottom. "You're welcome." Margaret went downstairs. Jamie was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked like a man who'd spent the night in a barn, hay on his shoulders, dark circles under his eyes, hands wrapped around a coffee cup gone cold. "His fever broke," Margaret said. Jamie closed his eyes, his shoulders dropped. The breath he let out sounded like it had been locked inside his chest for 12 hours. "I should have stayed." "Yes, you should have." "I couldn't." "You could have. You chose not to. There's a difference." His eyes opened. Raw. No walls, no granite, just a man stripped bare. "When I saw the blood, all I could see was Lizzie. The same sound in her chest, the same fever. I watched her die in that bed. And when Ben..." His jaw clenched. "Ben isn't Lizzie," Margaret said. "And I'm not you. I didn't leave." The words landed hard. She watched him absorb the blow. "Your son called for you last night. He was scared and burning with fever, and he wanted his father. I was there. Kate was there. You were in the barn." "I know." "Lizzie left a note in her recipe box. Did you know that?" Jamie went still. "What?" "A note at the bottom of the stack. She wrote it before she died. She said you'd try to shut everyone out. She said not to let you." The silence that filled the kitchen was so heavy Margaret could feel it pressing on her skin. "She knew me," Jamie said finally, "better than I knew myself." She was right. You shut down last night because feeling scared meant feeling something, and you've decided feeling nothing is safer. It is safer. It's not living, it's hiding, and your children deserve a father who's present even when it hurts. Jamie set down the cold coffee. His hands were shaking. "I'm afraid," he said. "Every day, every morning, I wake up afraid that today's the day I lose one of them, that the world takes something else, because that's what the world does. And so you hold them at arm's length, keep everything professional. Don't get attached." "Yes." "How's that working?" He looked at her. "It's not." "No, it's not, because Abby grabs strangers' hands because she's so hungry for someone to hold on to. Ben reads alone in the cold because he doesn't feel safe being himself. And Kate is 12 going on 40 because you checked out." Each sentence was a knife. Margaret delivered them anyway, because this man needed the truth more than comfort. "You're right," Jamie said, "about all of it. I know. Now go upstairs and sit with your son. Tell him you were scared. Tell him you're sorry. He's 9 and he thinks his father leaves when things get hard. Fix that." Jamie stood, walked past her, stopped at the stairs. "Margaret." "What?" "I'm glad you were here last night." "I'm glad I was too. Now go." He went. Margaret made pancakes. cloud-shaped ones, made coffee, bacon, biscuits that came out golden. The hands filed in. Hank first. He looked at Margaret's face, the dark circles, the flour on her apron. Said nothing about the food. Just sat, ate everything, squeezed her shoulder on the way out. Heard the boys better. You did good, Miss Hayes. Thank you, Hank. Don't thank me. Thank whoever taught you to be stubborn enough to sit up all night when his own father couldn't. Nobody taught me that. I learned it by having nobody sit up for me. Hank's face softened. Maybe that's the best teacher there is. The hard kind. Margaret woke at 4, knowing something was wrong. The wind had changed. For 6 weeks it had blown from the west. Now it came from the northeast harder, with a voice to it. A low moan that rose and fell. She lit the lamp and went downstairs. The house creaked in ways she hadn't heard before. By the time she reached the kitchen, she knew. A storm was coming, a bad one. Jamie was already dressed. Not in work clothes, in everything he owned. 2 shirts, heavy coat, scarf wrapped around his face. Hank stood beside him, dressed the same. What's happening? Margaret asked. Storm coming, Jamie said. Bad one. Temperature dropped 20 degrees in 3 hours. How bad? Hank answered. Worst I've seen in 10 years. The kind that kills cattle by the hundreds. Jamie pulled on his gloves. The herd's in the north pasture, 3 miles out. We're riding to drive them south. If they're caught in open ground when this hits, we'll lose half. All of you, all of us. Billy, Jack, Charlie, Hank, me. How long? 4 hours, maybe 5. Jamie's eyes found hers. Keep the children inside. Keep the fires burning. If the storm hits before we're back, don't open the door for anything. Jamie, he stopped. Come back. For one moment, the granite was gone. What was underneath was just a man, afraid and brave at the same time. I planned to, he said. They rode out, 5 men on horseback disappearing into darkness, turning gray. Margaret watched until she couldn't see them anymore. Kate came downstairs at 6, looked at the window, at Margaret's face. The storm. They went to move the herd. All of them. All of them. Kate was quiet. Mama died in a storm like this. She got sick going out to help the Pratts, and the cold took her. Your father knows what he's doing. That's what he said about Mama, too. Margaret made breakfast, fed the children, kept fires burning. The temperature dropped. 10 degrees by 8, 5 by 90. The wind built slowly, then all at once. Suddenly the house was under siege. The blizzard hit at 10 and turned the world white. Margaret had never heard anything like it. The wind didn't blow. It screamed. It threw snow against windows so hard the glass rattled. It found every crack and pushed through. She sealed cracks with cloth, kept the stove hot, moved the children to the kitchen, and kept them close. Ben read. Abby played with Mr. Buttons. Kate helped Margaret keep the fire going. By noon, the men should have been back. They weren't. By 1, Margaret was pacing. By 2, she was at the window staring into white that revealed nothing. They found shelter, Kate said. The line cabin on the North Ridge. Papa built it for this. They're waiting it out. You're sure? He knows the land. At 3, a horse came through the white. 1 horse riderless, staggering through drifts that reached its belly coated in ice. Margaret recognized it. Jamie's horse, the bay with the white blaze. No rider. Stay here, Margaret said. Margaret, don't open that door. Stay here. Keep the children warm. She pulled on every piece of clothing, Jamie's spare coat, 2 pairs of gloves, scarf around her face. She opened the door and the storm hit her like frozen needles. The horse had collapsed in the yard. Margaret reached it, grabbed the reins. The animal was shaking, ice in its mane. She pulled it toward the barn. Hank was there. He'd come in from the other direction on foot, his face white with frostbite, hands clumsy, blood on his forehead. Hank, where are the others? His words were slurred. Hypothermia. Billy and Jack and Charlie made the line cabin. Boss and I got separated. Horse spooked. Threw Boss into a gully about a mile north. Is he alive? He was when I left, but that was an hour ago, and he can't walk. His legs hurt. Hank swayed. I tried to carry him. Couldn't. Came back for help. You're frozen. I'll go back. Just need a minute. Hank, you'll die out there. Then I'll die trying. That man saved my life. I'm not leaving him. Margaret grabbed his shoulders. Where exactly? North Road, about a mile past the big pine struck by lightning. There's a bend and a drop-off on the right. He's down there. I'm going. Miss Hayes, you can't. You can barely walk. If you go back, you'll die. And then nobody finds him. Get inside. Tell Kate where I've gone. Hank looked at her. This woman who'd arrived 8 weeks ago, unable to cook a pancake, asking him to trust her with his boss's life. The lightning pine's got a split trunk. Can't miss it. Follow the road north. The bend goes left. The gully's on the right, maybe 10 feet deep. He was conscious. I'll find him. Margaret took the strongest horse, a draft horse named Biscuit that Hank said was too stubborn to spook. She was terrified of horses. She'd told Jamie that the first morning, standing over burned pancakes, confessing every lie she'd carried west. She mounted Biscuit and rode into the blizzard. The cold was a living thing. It wrapped around her like arms trying to drag her down. The wind tore at her coat. She couldn't see more than 10 feet. The world had been reduced to white and noise, in the desperate conviction that somewhere ahead, a man was dying in a ditch. She found the lightning pine, split trunk. She turned north. The road was buried, but Biscuit knew it. The horse plowed forward with blind determination. The bend, left. The drop-off, right. Margaret dismounted and crawled to the edge. Jamie. The wind swallowed her voice. She screamed again. Jamie, Jamie Thornton. A sound, faint. Below, not words, a groan. She slid down the gully wall and found him at the bottom. He was half buried, his left leg bent at an angle that made her stomach lurch. His face, white lips, blue eyes closed. Snow covered his chest, piling on him like the earth was trying to take him early. Jamie. She knelt, brushed snow from his face. His skin was ice. Jamie, open your eyes. Nothing. Jamie Thornton, you open your eyes right now. You don't get to die in a ditch. You hear me? You don't get to die before you've given me a chance to answer you. His eyes open, barely, slits of blue-gray and a face shutting down. Margaret, I'm here. You shouldn't be here. Too late. We're going to get you out and onto a horse and back to your house where your children are waiting. Can't move. Legs broken. I don't care if both legs are broken. You're moving. Margaret, it's too cold. Just go back. The children are safe. Kate's with them, and I'm not leaving you. I'm telling you to go, and I'm telling you no. I said no to Preston Blackwell, and I'll say no to you. You don't get to decide when I walk away. Something that might have been a laugh came out of him. Weak, broken, but there. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man, we're matched. Now put your arm around my neck. Getting him up took everything she had. He was 6 feet of dead weight and frozen muscle. His leg buckled. The scream he muffled against her shoulder was the worst sound Margaret had ever heard. I know, she said. I know it hurts. Keep moving. 1 step. 2. The gully wall was steep and the snow deep, and the wind fought them with every inch. Margaret's back screamed. Her legs burned. She couldn't feel her hands. But they held on, because they'd learned that on a Boston laundry floor, wringing sheets until her fingers bled. And they were not going to let go now. Biscuit waited at the top, patient as stone. Getting Jamie onto the horse was the hardest thing Margaret had ever done. Harder than burying her mother, harder than leaving Grace, harder than standing on that platform watching Preston drive away. She lifted. He pulled. Between them, they got him across the saddle. Sitting upright was impossible with a broken leg. Margaret mounted behind him, wrapped one arm around his waist, took the reins with the other. Stay awake, she said into his ear. Talk to me. About what? Anything. Tell me about Lizzie. You want to hear about my dead wife right now. I want to hear your voice. I want to know you're alive. Jamie talked, broken sentences through chattering teeth, about meeting Lizzie at a church social, about the way she laughed, about proposing in a rainstorm, about Kate being born on the hottest day in July, about Ben in a snowstorm, about Abby in spring. Margaret guided Biscuit through the white. She couldn't see the road, couldn't see the ranch, could only trust the horse and the sound of Jamie's voice and the arm she kept tight around his waist, holding him in the saddle, holding him in the world. Margaret, I'm here. I love you. Tell me again when you're not dying. I'm not dying. You're half frozen with a broken leg in a blizzard. This is not when we have this conversation. When then? When you're sitting in your kitchen with coffee and all your limbs working. Is that a yes? It's a stay alive and find out. That's motivation enough. The ranch appeared through the white, in pieces, the barn first, then the house, then the porch where Kate stood, with a lantern defying every instruction, holding up light like a beacon. "They're back," Kate screamed. "Margaret's back. She's got Papa." They got him inside. Margaret, Hank, Kate together, carrying him through the door and onto the kitchen table. This family and their kitchen table, altar, an operating room, and the place where everything that mattered happened. His leg was broken below the knee. Margaret could see the angle. She'd set Ben's shoulder from half-remembered reading. She'd stitched cuts and fought fevers, but she'd never set a broken bone. "Hank, hold him down. Kate, get the whiskey." "You've done this before," Hank asked. "No, but I've read about it, and right now reading is all we've got." She gave Jamie the whiskey. He drank, coughed, drank again. His eyes found hers. "I trust you." "Then hold on." She set the bone. The sound it made going back into place was something she'd hear in nightmares for years. Jamie didn't scream. He bit through the leather strap Hank put between his teeth and made a sound like an animal trying to be human. Then it was done. The bone was straight. Margaret splinted it with barrel staves and strips of sheet. Her hands shook so badly she could barely tie the knots. She wrapped him in blankets, built the fire till the kitchen ablazed, cleaned cuts with whiskey, stitched the deepest cut on his forehead. Abby brought Mr. Buttons and tucked him under Jamie's arm. "He helped Ben. He'll help you." Jamie pulled his daughter close and held her. Over her brown curls, his eyes found Margaret, full of something that had nothing to do with gratitude. Ben brought David Copperfield. "I can read to you? I'd like that, son." Kate brought a second blanket. When she straightened, she looked at Margaret. "You rode a horse. You're scared of horses." "I am." "But you rode one in the blizzard to find him." "Yes." "Why?" Margaret looked at this girl who'd lost her mother, built walls, broken them down. "Because some things are worth being scared for." Kate nodded. Then she walked to Margaret, put her arms around her, and held on. Margaret hugged back. Over Kate's shoulder, she saw Jamie watching with tears running down his face that he made no effort to hide. The blizzard raged. The fire crackled. Ben read Dickens. Abby fell asleep on her father's chest. Kate sat beside Margaret, head on her shoulder. "Margaret," Jamie said. "Not yet. You're still on the kitchen table. I know where I am, and I know where I want to be. Where? With you, permanently, all of us." "Jamie Thornton, you are lying on a table with a broken leg and a stuffed rabbit under your arm. This is not a proposal." "The hell it isn't." "Language." "Abby's asleep." "I've heard worse from Hank," Kate said. Jamie continued. "I love you, Margaret Hayes. I loved you when you burned those first pancakes. I loved you when you told my daughter you were a terrible mother. I loved you when you sat up all night with my son. I loved you when you refused to be Preston's second choice. And I love you now because I'm done being afraid. I'm done pretending. I'm done building walls that keep out the only thing worth letting in." Margaret's vision blurred. She pressed her hand to her mouth. "Say yes," Kate whispered. "Say yes," Abby mumbled. "Not asleep after all." "Say yes," Ben said. His voice didn't break once. Margaret laughed. It came out wet and broken and full of everything she'd been carrying since Boston, since her mother's death, since the train platform. "Yes," she said. "God help me, yes." Jamie reached for her hand. She gave it. His fingers closed around hers, the same way they had in the kitchen 3 nights ago. Careful, deliberate, like holding something he'd finally decided he was allowed to keep. "Soon as I can stand, I'm marrying you. Soon as you can stand, I'll be there." The blizzard howled. The house stood. The fire burned. And 5 people who'd been broken in different ways sat together in a kitchen that smelled like whiskey and wood smoke and something else. Something harder to name but impossible to mistake. It smelled like home. 3 weeks later, on the first Sunday Jamie could stand without crutches, they married in the parlor. The ranch hands stood along one wall. Hank served as best man. Dot Sanders sat in front with her handkerchief out. And to Margaret's surprise, Constance Whitmore was there, sitting stiff-backed. But there. Ben read a passage from Ruth. "Where you go, I will go." His voice was clear and steady. He didn't stutter once. When he finished, he looked at Margaret. That's how I feel about you. Jamie put his hand on his son's shoulder. Ben leaned into his father's side. The gap between them was closed. Abby served as flower girl, threw lavender with the force of a baseball pitcher, hit Hank twice, wore her nightgown, both socks missing, Mr. Buttons under her arm. You look pretty, Abby told Margaret. Thank you, sweetheart. You look like a mama. The kitchen went quiet. Margaret knelt down. I look like Margaret. Your mama was beautiful and brave. I'm not her. I know, but can I call you mama anyway? Not instead of her, just also. Margaret looked up at Jamie. He nodded. Yes, Abby. Good. Kate stepped forward. Wait. She pulled out a small piece of paper. Soft with handling, she unfolded it. Margaret recognized Lizzie's handwriting. I found this in Mama's Bible, Kate said. She wrote it when she was sick. To whoever loves my family after me. Thank you for being brave enough to try. Jamie will make it difficult. The children will make it harder. But they are worth every hard thing. Take care of them. Let them take care of you. And tell Jamie that I said it's all right to be happy again. He has my permission. He always did. Kate folded the note. Tears ran down her face. That's from Mama. I wanted her here today. She is here, Margaret said. Jamie couldn't speak. He pulled Kate into his arms and held her the way he should have for 5 years, tight and complete. I'm sorry, he said, for every day I wasn't there. I know, Papa. Your mother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. After the ceremony, Constance approached Margaret. I was wrong about you, she said. The words came out hard, but they came. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. Constance, if you're going to be part of this community, we might as well use first names, she was. Lizzie would have liked you. She had the same stubbornness. I take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. Reluctantly. Margaret smiled. I'll take reluctant. That night, Jamie and Margaret sat on the porch despite the cold, his leg propped, blanket across their laps, coffee laced with whiskey in their hands. Lizzie's note, Jamie said. She knew. She always knew. Knew me better than I knew myself. Jamie took Margaret's hand. I spent 5 years being faithful to grief. Thought that was the same as being faithful to her. It wasn't. She wanted me to live. You're listening now. Because you made me. Because you showed up unable to cook and proceeded to save my son's life and my daughter's heart and drag me out of a snowdrift by sheer force of will. Don't forget the biscuits. I make excellent biscuits now. Jamie laughed, a real laugh, the kind Kate said she hadn't heard in years. Margaret Thornton, he said, testing the name. Margaret Thornton, she repeated. It fit like the ring on her finger. Any regrets? One, I wish I'd met you first. You did come west for me. You just didn't know it yet. Spring arrived all at once. Snow melting in torrents, mud everywhere, the creek swelling. Margaret stood in the yard and felt the sun on her face and thought about the woman she'd been on that train platform. She barely recognized her. That woman had been terrified, of wanting things, of needing people, of the vulnerability that came with loving someone enough to cross a continent. Margaret still wanted things, still needed people, still felt vulnerable every morning when she looked at Jamie and thought, I could lose this. But she'd learned something. From a dead woman's recipe cards, in a 12-year-old's fury, in a 6-year-old's trust, in a 9-year-old's courage. She'd learned that the fear of losing something was not a reason to refuse having it. The risk was the price, and the price was worth paying. She planted a garden that spring, the same patch where Lizzie had once grown vegetables. She planted them with Abby beside her, the child's hands pushing seeds with the concentration of a surgeon. Will they grow, Abby asked, if we take care of them? What if they don't? Then we plant again. How many times? As many times as it takes, Kate helped. Kneeling in the mud in a dress Lizzie had made, getting dirt under her fingernails and not caring. That summer, a letter arrived from Preston. No return address. Dear Miss Hayes, I heard you married Thornton. I hope you're happy. I'm in Montana now. Cordelia is gone. The money is gone. I'm writing because I owe you an apology. You deserve better. I chose wrong and I've paid for it. I don't expect a forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I see it now. What I threw away. I hope Thornton knows what he has. Yours, Preston Blackwell. Margaret read it twice. Then she folded it, put it in the stove, and watched it burn. She didn't feel satisfaction, just a cool compassion for a man who'd learned too late that character mattered more than beauty. She didn't tell Jamie, not because it was a secret, just because it was finished. Preston was a chapter in a book she'd closed. That fall, Margaret told Jamie she was pregnant. They were on the porch after the children were asleep. "I'm carrying a child." Jamie's hand tightened on hers. She felt the tremor. Fear. The old fear. The one that whispered Lizzie died this way. "I'm scared," he said. "I know, so am I. Last time, I'm not Lizzie, and this isn't last time. This is now." He turned to face her, his blue-gray eyes looking at her with everything. Love, fear, hope. "We'll be all right," Margaret said. "All 5 of us. All 6 now. You can't know that." "No, but I can choose to believe it. And so can you." He pulled her close, held her where she could hear his heartbeat. Steady. The heart of a man who'd lost everything and found the courage to love again. 6, he said. "I like the sound of that." The baby was born in May, on a morning when the wildflowers had begun to open and the mountains were still capped with snow. A girl, dark hair like Jamie's, gray-green eyes that couldn't decide whose color they wanted. They named her Hope. Kate held her first, sat in the rocking chair where Lizzie had nursed 3 babies, and held this new sister with hands gentle and sure. "She's so small," Kate whispered. "You were smaller," Jamie said. "Was I? Smallest thing I'd ever seen. Your mother said you looked like an angry potato." Kate laughed and cried and held the baby closer. Ben touched Hope's hand with one finger. When the tiny fist closed around it, his face broke open with wonder. "She's strong." "She comes from strong people," Margaret said. Abby peered into the bundle. "She doesn't have socks on." "She's a baby Abby. Babies don't wear socks." "I don't wear socks either. We have that in common." In the parlor, Margaret had hung 2 photographs side by side, one of Lizzie young and smiling, one of Margaret on her wedding day wearing Lizzie's dress standing beside the man they'd both loved in different seasons. 2 women, 2 stories, both woven into the fabric of this family, this house, this piece of Wyoming that had seen so much loss and refused to stop growing. Years passed the way years do on a ranch, measured in seasons and calves and children growing taller. Kate became a teacher. Ben became a writer. Abby became a doctor. The first woman doctor in 3 counties because a 6-year-old who'd watched Margaret set a broken leg in a blizzard had decided right then what she wanted to be. Hope grew up hearing the story. Every child in the Thornton family grew up hearing it, because Margaret told it the way her mother had told her stories. Sitting by the fire on winter nights with the wind outside and the warmth inside. "Tell us about the train. Tell us about the pancakes. Tell us about the blizzard." And Margaret would tell it. All of it. The platform, the rejection, the crawling, the man with blue-gray eyes who picked up her valise, the burned pancakes and the dead woman's recipe cards, the girl who slammed doors, the boy who stuttered, the child who grabbed her hand. She told them about Preston too, not with bitterness, with the clear understanding that some rejections are redirections, that the man who walks away sometimes does you the greatest kindness by leaving room for the right man to walk in. She told them about Lizzie, always about Lizzie, because Lizzie was part of this story too, the invisible thread that held it all together, the woman who'd loved first and best and left behind a note that said, "Don't let him close himself off." Margaret didn't let him, not once, not ever. For 41 years of marriage, she kept that promise to a woman she'd never met. And Jamie kept his promise to stay present, to stay open, to choose love over safety every single day, even when it was terrifying, especially when it was terrifying. He died at 80 in the bed they'd shared for 4 decades, with Margaret's hand in his and their children and grandchildren filling the house with the noise and life that Lizzie had dreamed of and Margaret had built. His last words were, "You were worth every scared moment." Margaret lived 3 more years, long enough to see Hope graduate from medical school, long enough to hold her first great-grandchild, long enough to sit on the porch of Iron Ridge Ranch on a winter evening and watch the snow fall and remember the day she'd arrived with $14 and a valise held together with twine and a heart that had been broken before it had even learned what it was breaking for. The mail-order bride never arrived at her intended destination. She arrived instead at the place she was always meant to be. Not because fate was kind, but because a woman on her knees on a frozen platform made a choice. She chose to stand up. She chose to take the job. She chose to learn, to stay, to fight, to love, to ride a horse she was terrified of into a blizzard for a man who was worth being scared for. That choice built a ranch, a family, a legacy that lasted 6 generations. It built a home, and it proved once and for all that the life you plan is never as strong as the life you build from the wreckage of the plan that failed. That the love you chase across a continent in letters is never as real as the love you find standing in a kitchen at 4 in the morning, burning pancakes, telling the truth and being told, "That's enough. You're enough. Stay." She stayed.